DC Comics' Absolute Universe has generated a lot of discussion. There has even been a tiny bit of crossover. Now, each series in that universe has come at its core characters from a bit of a different angle. Not just in terms of repositioning them for an alternate Darkseid timeline, but also from a storytelling perspective. Some stick more close to tradition. Others reimagine the mythologies. Others go for big bombast. But there's one that's very different, not just in story, but in approach. Time of recording, and that's Absolute Martian Manhunter, a work that some in certain corners have compared to Vertigo's The Changing Man, which take that how you want to. And it's a work I want to examine not solely for its contents, but for its form. In fact, I want to focus there. Absolute Martian Manhunter is an excellent example of what happens when you achieve a synergistic vision between writer and artist that elevates the story as a whole through the combination, taking what would otherwise be standard story beats and emotional themes and transforming them into something unique and at times challenging. The latter part is not always embraced or welcomed. The result is an ambitious work taking place inside of a mainstream comic company that is not afraid to not be for everyone, which is not commonplace when it comes to the big two, the North American big two. And that point about it not being for everyone is important because it's not going to be. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics. Let's examine Absolute Martian Manhunter. The creative team behind Absolute Martian Manhunter is Denise Camp, writing, and Javier Rodriguez on art. Now, time for recording, there are 8 issues out. The story's in the process of introducing a radically different version of Despero, or Despair-O, or Despair-Zero, as he's been called in the issue. Still an alien presence, but tied to a lot of emotionality and almost non-corporealness, as a lot of the entities in the story are. He's been reimagined as something less like your standard Star Trek or even earlier Golden Age sci-fi alien, and is something more conceptual, a bit harder to grasp, and that's intentional. The aliens in this are purposely designed to be a little bit more unknowable, a tiny bit more Lovecraftian in their theming. They're just shy of the side of incomprehensible, and as a result, not beings one can be fully comfortable with. They feel alien, and the work uses the visual medium to accent this, starting with the Martian itself. Now, one of the first changes that this series made, and an important key one, was separating the Martian and John Jones into 2 separate entities. You have human FBI agent John Jones and the Martian, who takes him on as host, kinda. He can also separate, kind of. He's called the Martian, but he's not really from Mars. That's just a way that John can conceive of and understand him. Again, playing with the idea that he's understanding it as much as his perception will allow. He's putting in a frame that works for him, so his mind doesn't break. Now, from the outset of their fusion, John's worldview is quite literally altered. He sees things differently. And this is represented several ways, but firstly through the color work in the book, which is oftentimes explosive. The telepathic aspect of the original Martian Manhunter character is maintained, but it's also given an empathy layer. And you see it oftentimes through these colorful manifestations that are coming off of people in various colored smokes. Their energies, their emotions made manifest, which is also playing with the fire associations that the character has. They also play with that with the White Martian. So from the first issue, there's an increase in colors and of wafts of this colorful smoke in areas it doesn't belong. Indeed, the Martian also is made visible in certain areas and objects. The result is both fascinating and at times disorienting and off-putting. And this is by design. And if one ends up liking what the book is doing, it creates a rather rewarding and rereadable experience. As John begins to investigate not just the cases that he's been assigned with the Martian inside him and at his side, but the odd happenings stemming from the influence of the White Martian. John Jones is in many ways written to be an almost kind of typical classic noirish character. He's in his own head a lot. He's disconnected from his family as well as his own emotions, which are kind of hard for him to present and articulate. He's viewed as alien and othered by those around him, something that he gets to explicitly see with the Martian with him. His colors are more standard, but tend towards darker, more again noirish tones, which can also mirror his mental state. By contrast, the Martian seemingly communicates through emotional and telepathic impressions, manifesting in large explosions of color, a rainbow miasma, at times seemingly almost like geometric abstraction. And John can see this and comes able to interpret to some extent. And seeing all of these things, be it from the people close to him, suspects at crime scenes, it very much mirrors the idea that it can be hard to interpret other people's emotions or motivations. All of this is at play around him, and it impacts how he interacts with the world. In this way, the art serves to articulate visually something that could be quite cumbersome or tedious to write out. Something that may come across better in a solely prose type work, because one can take the time to pontificate upon the protagonist's headspace. But if one does the same thing with walls of text inside of a comic book, it comes across as clunky and expository, overly expository. And in a fusion medium, which is largely what comics is, a blending of the writing and the illustration, you need to have a balance. The way that John interprets the world, as well as the way that the Martian communicates with him, gives them a twist on on your standard oddly matched cop dynamic. I know he's an agent, but that's the kind of thing they're playing with, almost a buddy cop. They're a psychedelic alien nation. The fact that the Martian is meant to be alien is showcased in the at times fragmented thoughts and married with the free-flowing colors and shapes. The way that the Martian speaks, it sometimes takes a moment for John to interpret it, or the grammar is not quite what one would expect, or the thoughts may seem disconnected, but they pertain to what's going on. Again, all in an attempt to make the character feel more alien. Now, this also means that at times the book forgoes traditional panel structure. Your eyes are still guided along, it doesn't break with that, and it's not constant, but there are times when it pushes it. It can surprise you a bit. But again, it's not all the time, so it doesn't wear out its welcome. It saves it for certain key moments. The Martian's interaction with John will also sometimes result in memories or others as thoughts intruding upon his psyche, which gives the work an at times non-linear kind of feeling, or the sense that time can move a bit differently for John than it is for others. He's discussing how much time has gone by, but it simply doesn't quite feel that way, as if he's just experiencing things differently, and then that in turn is played out with the reader. Sometimes big events like the blackout caused partially by the White Martian and their ability to harness the negativity and malaise of human emotion and cause it to explode into riots and fear can seem somewhat removed, because John is always struggling to interpret and process what's going on. He's still an action-driven character, he still does things, but he also is a tad disconnected. By contrast, he'll have these moments of epiphany brought on by his connection to the Martian that allows him to see deeply into those he loves, or also into himself and how that's not exactly coming across. He can't always do something about how he feels, because despite everything, and even with the Martian there, he still is at his base himself. The result of all this is a work that clearly wants to be thought about, that is meticulously intentional in both its writing and its art. But that's not to say that it's super serious or dour all the time. It also has its cheeky moments. It has fun. It'll have references to other parts of the absolute universe or other things. And of course, there's Martian Manhunter references all over the place, to past villains who have been reimagined, to things like Chacos. It's not Martian Manhunter if there aren't Chacos. Chacos end up playing an important part, a darker part, but still. This series clearly has a love for Martian Manhunter's lore, and also the alien aspects of the DC universe, and also for playing with the comic medium and attempting to use it to accent the ability to convey a sense of alienness, to have that disconnect marry with the theme, the narrative, and the very form of the book itself. It's trying to bring them all together in a bit of a different way. Now, there have been those who say that this would not work without Rodriguez's art, and that is definitely the case, but it also wouldn't work without Camp's writing. This isn't one of those instances where the art is carrying the book, but one where the two elements have become so bound, so intertwined, that together they are creating a truly reciprocal relationship. They're both taking on and enhancing the other. The more well-known, out-of-his-depth, kind of muted agent character, who stumbles onto something bigger than he ever imagined, which challenges his personal life and even puts his loved ones in danger, is brought to new heights by this more out-there presentation. It's doing what exploring a standard trope does best. It's trying to do something different, elevate it, put a twist on it. In this case, a lot of that twist can come through the ability to marry the writing with the presentation. At the same time, the art is given form, focus, and direction thanks to the writing. As you see John come to experience and in some cases understand the complex emotional lives of all the people around him, and also see how that impacts people's actions, you see that the color work makes sense. It's quite literally not black and white. It's a visual representation of the nuance of the world. And because of this, it allows one to play in those more nuanced depictions of conflict, of ideas. Again, this is something that wants you to think about things. It's not just there to lecture you. And while this may sound a tad impenetrable, it's really not. The main beats of the story are fairly easy to follow. In fact, some parts of them are quite standard. And some more quirky elements become codified through the repetition. As you see them, you start to understand how they work. You get used to it. You get more immersed in the world. A little thing is like how the Martian's description of negative human elements it encounters, it expresses with a bad idea and a number, building up to the truly amazing reveal of Darkseid as the first bad idea as Darkseid creates this universe. It is the kind of work that if one wants to get everything out of it, one has to immerse themselves in. It's not kind of a casual, just read it and throw it aside kind of work. And you need both. You need both types of work. It depends what you're in the mood for. This is something that demands attention. And if one pays attention, there are lots of little details and things to get out of it. And it started to play more and more with different ways of conveying information as it's gone on, and gain more confidence and space to do so. You'll even see more differences in paneling and presentation in the more standard parts of the story. And also in terms of the way certain things are being presented, it plays in some avenues not everybody may be familiar with. It's playing a lot with drug imagery, and some concepts mirror highs. There are elements of neurodivergence in how John interprets and interacts with the world, and also in his son. You could also read that into the Martian. So for some, they may interpret the work through that lens. There is also a lot of psychology at play. All that is to say that there are multiple layers and ways to read this work. Some may have others I haven't even mentioned. As said, but bears repeating, this work invites discussion. And it could be deeply personal for different reasons depending upon the reader. And some of those interpretations may conflict or contrast, and that's part of the fun. This series is very much trying to tell its story its own way. And yet it hasn't abandoned the superhero or DC Comics lore/frame. It continually reinterprets it and sometimes pushes up against it. It certainly feels the most different of all the Absolute books time recording. But the Absolute Universe is a good space for that because it is kind of its own separate thing. I am curious as to how this book and character is going to fit into the overall universe as a whole. How it will be presented when/if someone else interprets this character, just because it's so singular compared to the others. But it would be cool to also see this from an outside perspective. How does John, the Martian, those aliens seem like they fit into everything? But it's not the only work that plays with some of those things. Green Lantern plays a lot with philosophy. Now, this work and works like it can sometimes be labeled as pretentious. But pretension involves a kind of affectation, a try-hardness. I would argue this book is just attempting to be its own thing, and because of the formatting, it has to be deliberately intentional about it. One couldn't make a work like this without being so intentional. And at its core, there's nothing wrong with creating a work that one wants somebody to spend more time with and think about. The question then becomes, is it worth spending and taking that time with? And that is a Miles May Vary moment. But to me, pretension implies just doing something for the sake of doing it, just because it seems cool or intellectual, and to me, that's not what this book is. It actually has something to say. The thing is, whether one likes or dislikes it, that's an entirely different matter. And this work I can see really not landing for some people. With something so focused on its own message, you are going to have that deliberateness that for some is just going to come across as try hard. As well, when you have a work that incorporates psychological as well as socially conscious theming or discussion, that can turn some people right off. Or for some, they may not be turned off by those ideas and discussing them, but by the presentation. This may be too atypical, or for some actually difficult to look at. There's a lot going on visually in this book. For some, it may be too chaotic or difficult to actually even interpret. For some, it may actually be too much. Also, if one is colorblind, that's very much going to alter the experience. And for a work where the art stands out so much, that could be a turnoff or stopping point. And some may feel like, been there, seen that. This is not the first mind-bending comic, and it won't be the last. And for some, it really won't be that deep. Just no thank you. Not everything's for everyone, and sometimes it just doesn't land. And there's nothing wrong with that. As mentioned, this work is what it is. And what it is will not be and is not trying to be for everybody, which is a little refreshing. While this really works for me and I have a lot of fun reading it, rereading it, looking for little references, looking for little clues, trying to interpret the exact meanings behind what the aliens want from people, comparing their conceptions in this universe to the mainline, that's not going to be fun for everyone. For some, that may sound tedious or like homework. We all enjoy things differently on top of enjoying different things. To me, this comic is atypical in a way we don't often see in North American mainstream comics time recording. But because it's attached to a more well-known lore, I think it could be a cool entry point for people who are down to try something a bit more out there in the comic space, without diving into something really out there, getting very indie, or getting really out there, something like the Incal or something. Some may feel like this is just glaze, but I really like this work, and I want to try and articulate what I thought was interesting and special about it. And as said, I mostly focused on the form here. I didn't even get to some of the plot points that really stand out for me, just the way the marriage is depicted, the fun of the mystery of what these aliens truly want, and seeing their different emotional impacts on John and humans in general. Despero is this kind of negative disconnect as contrasted to the Martian's empathy and what that's doing to John. There's just so much there. And all of these are also mirroring the things and changes that are happening in John's own life. With a work like this, form matters equally to the plot since it's being used to present key elements from the former and emphasize them. Now, you may entirely disagree, and please feel free to. These types of discussions and varied opinions are part of what makes art special. So please share all your thoughts. What do you think of this series? Up your alley? Not for you? What's a comic you feel really passionately about? Your thoughts, I want to hear them. Please leave them down below. While you're down there, please do YouTube things like share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to discuss comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.